for us, even the little we packed to take with us. They would tell us to leave. This is not your country.
You've come here and you found safety, but do you really feel safe?
I'm scared. There's no safety, even here. It feels they are just quiet because of the rainy season, but they've been threatening to come here to Umbaro.
These Darfuri villages and towns are ground zero for the RSF's scorched earth policy, now living through a dark déjà vu, 2 decades on, raided by violent militiamen, more powerful and well-armed than ever before. Yusra al-Bagher, Sky News, North Darfur.
A nursery worker who abused more than 20 babies has been jailed for 8 years. Roxana Leka was caught on CCTV punching and kicking babies and toddlers, pulling their hair and vaping into cots while working at the Riverside Nursery in Twickenham in southwest London. Prosecutors described her crimes as exceptionally cruel. Tributes have been paid to the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Lord Menzies Campbell, who has died at the age of 84. He represented the constituency of North East Fife for almost 3 decades. Before entering politics, Lord Campbell was an Olympic athlete, and for several years he held the British record for the 100-metre sprint.
We're all incredibly sad. Ming was a really warm, caring human being. I count him as one of my friends, and he's a huge loss to the party. He'll be remembered by so many things, not just an amazing sprinter and athlete as he was, but also his brilliant legal brain. And he brought that particularly to bear on the Iraq War when, as the Liberal Democrats Foreign Affairs spokesperson, he showed how it was so wrong that we went to that war. But he was such a rich personality. I think people across political parties will mourn his death.
To the Ryder Cup now, and it looks as though it will be advantage Team Europe after a blistering start in New York. The pairings of Jon Rahm and Tyrrell Hatton, Rory McIlroy and Tommy Fleetwood, and Matt Fitzpatrick and Ludwig Aberg put Europe 3 points ahead in the morning foursomes. Fitzpatrick's putt here was a sweet moment for him, having won just 1 point in 8 Ryder Cup matches before today. Now that saw off world number 1 Scotty Scheffler and Russell Henley. Well, with Europe 3-1 ahead, Team USA were in need of some inspiration ahead of the 4 balls, while the unusually quiet crowd at Bethpage Black were on their feet as President Trump arrived on the first hole, along with a fly past as the American national anthem was sung. Rory McIlroy missed an easy putt at the 3rd, and that only fired him up. 2 successive birdies on the 6th, and here on the 7th. In a match that ebbed and flowed both ways alongside Shane Lowry, he's tied with Patrick Cantlay and Sam Burns. Well, Justin Thomas and Cameron Young made easy work of beating Ludwig Aberg and Rasmus Højgaard 6 and 5, but this putt from Sepp Straka ensured he and Jon Rahm saw off Scotty Scheffler and JJ Spaun 3 and 2. Europe lead 4-2, approaching the end of the final 2 4-balls. That's the golf. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by The Spectator's deputy political editor, James Heal, and The Guardian columnist, Zoe Williams. Welcome both. Among the stories we'll be discussing this on the front of The Guardian. The headline, Labour in fight for the soul of the nation, says Starmer. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with The Spectator's deputy political editor, James Heal, and The Guardian columnist, Zoe Williams. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, on The Guardian's front page, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer saying that Labour is in a fight for the soul of the nation as the threat of reform ousting them in the next general election grows. Meanwhile, the Eye details the backlash the PM is facing from his party after announcing plans to make digital ID cards compulsory. The Mail leads with claims about the number of migrants in Calais looking to make their way to the UK. And on the front of the Times, calls from the Chancellor for a deal with the EU that will reduce the need for tax rises by allowing freedom of movement for young people. The Financial Times reports that President Trump will continue to launch prosecutions against his political opponents after the U.S. Justice Department filed criminal charges against former FBI Director James Comey. The Telegraph leads with comments from a top advisor to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who says the king helped change Donald Trump's mind on Ukraine. While the Sun claims to know what went on in the most recent meeting between Prince Harry and King Charles. Meanwhile, the Express focuses on Prince William, who's opened up on coping with the cancer struggles faced by both the Princess of Wales and the King. That story is also on the front page of The Mirror as he reflects on the hardest year I've ever had. And The Star also reflects on a difficult year for the Prince of Wales. And we are joined tonight by James Heal and Zoe Williams. Thanks so much for coming in. It's always great to see you. Let's start with domestic politics. And the front page of The Guardian, though it's picked up in several of the papers in one way or another. This quote from Keir Starmer, who was speaking today in central London, Labour in fight for the soul of the nation. And of course, the coming week is the Labour conference. Zoe, start us off with this. What did you make of that statement?
So this was the Global Progress Alliance Summit? Action Summit, something like that. Hosted by IPPR. Keir gave a speech and then he was on a panel with Mark Carney, among others, and he was actually slightly looser and more revealing on the panel. In the speech, he said we were in a fight of our lives. He used the phrase patriotic renewal many, many times, but it doesn't actually mean anything. You know, it's something that's been cooked up, I believe, in the Tony Blair Institute within the past 48 hours. So, you know, he was sort of trying to preach a creed that nobody had really heard of before. He had a large amount of these are our values, our enemies seek to undermine us, but he didn't name those enemies. He was curiously coy. It was very, very broad, you know. He spoke at length about the kind of people who portray London as a wasteland. He's talking about Donald Trump at the same time as saying how great it will be to have trade deals with Donald Trump. So he doesn't know his elbow from the other thing that you're supposed to know. And yet, there was one crunchy policy announcement, which was the ID cards that had obviously been trailed heavily all morning. And there was another announcement about renewable energy. He kind of pledged, well, he gave 3 good reasons why we'd want nuclear, wind and solar to be our next wave of energy use, but with no detail on that. Essentially, it was a speech saying we're going to have digital ID cards to tackle immigration. Nobody thinks that's going to work, but that's the only thing the speech really said.
Yeah, but James, it also comes after a poll came out that suggests that Nigel Farage would be Prime Minister if there was an election tomorrow.
Yes, a massive MRP poll, the first of its kind since June, showed Nigel Farage just falling short, 310 seats, if he were to have an election tomorrow. And, of course, Labour going from 411 seats all the way down to 144. So many, many hundreds of seats to be lost. And I think that shows perhaps after a summer in which Labour hasn't really sort of seemed to grip a lot of the political issues, there's been a lot of drift. I think there's been a sense that Reform has been out there running riot. Nigel Farage has been on the papers every single day, shaping the news headlines. And I think that right now this was an attempt to get a sort of fight back going before Labour conference. It's going to be a difficult time. We've seen Andy Burnham this week challenging, not so subtly, the Prime Minister. And so he was attempting there to talk to his party today to say, look, I hear your concerns about the sort of rise of what he would consider to be the far right. I'm going to be dealing with that. But I think, as Zoe says there, he was particularly in that speech a little bit stiff, awkward, talking in generalities rather than specifics. And I do think there will be lots of questions about it over the next 4 or 5 days in Liverpool.
Sorry, the really funny thing about the speech was that there were loads of quite abstract terms that didn't really, like industrialised divisiveness. And you're like, that's the kind of thing I would write in a comment column if I was tired. I wouldn't do it in a speech to the nation's like international progressives. It was a massive big deal, this conference, or it should have been, and it did not feel that way.
But I guess just on a final point on this, it's a taster of what we're going to see at the party conference.
Well, you'd hope you have more sort of understandable language. This was just very kind of abstract, and it didn't really sort of grip the soul. And I think that, yeah, he'd need to get a better effort when it comes to Tuesday's speech.
Okay. Are you going to go to conference?
I'll be there.
Okay. It'd be interesting to see what he says.
Didn't put me off today, I'll say that.
Let's go to the Times now. Interesting story here. I mean, again, obviously domestic politics and Labour and the government. EU deals can reduce need for tax rises, according to the Chancellor. Now, this is the youth mobility scheme, which I feel we've been talking about for ages and ages, and then it never quite happens. And her argument here, and this time, James, I'll start with you, is that it would actually, that the OBR should take the EU reset sort of in consideration when it comes up with its forecast.
Absolutely. So this is the great game of modern budgets. We're expecting to have that at the end of November. And really what Rachel Reeves is trying to do is do two things, I think. One of which is put some pressure on the OBR to say, look, this needs to be taken into account. We need to have this in terms of considering fiscal headroom. There are suggestions, perhaps, that the UK productivity isn't as high as it was going to be, so she needs this EU reset deal to offset that. The second thing is, I think, getting the Labour activists kind of fired up, because she's talking about sort of the EU deals. There's a lot of hope in Labour. There's some frustration that they aren't doing more to undo the Conservatives' Brexit settlement. So I think that she's trying to appeal in terms of the economic argument, but also politically show that actually this Labour Chancellor can do things that a Tory wouldn't.
And just to clarify, the youth mobility scheme is basically, I think it's under 30s and being able, you know, so both Brits going to the
and about 50,000 or so, we think.
The thing is, you say it feels like we've been talking about it forever. You have to give kudos to Best for Britain, the campaign, the pro-EU campaign group, because they have insisted on talking about this for years. Like, pretty much since the day Brexit was voted for, they've said, hang on a second, this is really unfair on young people. And as we get further away from Brexit, and the people who are now eligible for this scheme were 8 when the vote happened, you know, it does become much, much more important that we get some kind of deal on youth mobility.
Although I would say, I think that it's interesting, given we've got the sort of started to have AI first hit the kind of waves of new graduates going into that market, I wonder whether 50,000 people coming over here might actually be something that isn't particularly attractive to young people, given the kind of pressures on the job market, and also the fact that historically it seems UK graduates are far less likely to go over to Europe than our continental cousins.
Well, yeah, but that might change when there's no jobs here, right? I mean, you know, you really, I would love my kids to be able to go to another country. Not that I don't like them.
Temporarily, they'll come back.
They'll come back. Yeah,
not Australia.
She's making the link. I mean, here, reduced need for tax rises. So, you know, there may be all sorts of reasons why a youth mobility scheme may be a good idea. Do you see that direct link with tax rises?
The problem Reeves has is that she keeps praying to the gods of growth. She keeps doing it as a kind of incantation. I will bring growth and everything will be fine, and a government can create growth. It's really hard. Governments can't create growth. They never. It's very rarely linked to who's in government or where they've said growth is on their list of priorities. So when she kind of makes this last-ditch bid for, oh, this will be a bit of growth that I've created, you do think it's a little bit of wishful thinking.
But it's all about trying to just sort of get that narrative to the OBR, being like, we will do the planning changes, we will have these great trade deals with India and other countries. Actually, we need to have much less in the way of sort of fiscal headroom, because, as I say, it's all about sort of getting that kind of emphasis and debate with the markets.
OK, I think we have time to just do very quickly. I'm going to jump to the FT and look at this story. Trump to target others after Comey. Now, this is James Comey, former head of the FBI. He examined the 2016 Trump campaign's contacts with Russia. He has been charged. And now, well, we're kind of hearing, if you read between the lines, that Donald Trump says he may not be the last.
It was so chastening to listen to Comey describe this verdict, because, you know, he said that in his family, they always knew that there would be a price to pay for standing up to Trump. But it wasn't even, you know, it's not like he was outside the White House with a placard, you know. And
he was giving evidence to a congressional committee.
Yeah. And the idea that it would cost him his reputation, his liberty, his the good name, it's just... it's unbelievably shocking.
I think that we're going to see much more of this, and I think it's really striking that in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk assassination, there has been this talk of revenge and lawyering up. So I think we're going to see more of this James Comey-style persecution.
Yeah, it's interesting. The president actually says it's not about revenge, but then he adds, they went after me for 4 years. So maybe, you know, it sounds a little bit like that.
Bitter,
anyway,
bitter, yeah.
Coming up, it's been barely more than 24 hours since the government announced plans for digital ID cards. And already the public don't seem happy. We'll discuss that next.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days, as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimate 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the politics hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, I am talking about...
No, but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the politics hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me in the studio, James Heal and Zoe Williams. Let's go straight to the front page of the Eye and the story that we were mentioning because Keir Starmer announced it today. It's what the Eye is calling Brit Card, so digital ID. I don't think the official name is Brit Card. Probably shouldn't be as well, but it's already facing a major backlash on this. Zoe, there's been a petition against them, and they've got around, I think, 1 million signatures.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a backlash against from the citizens of Great Britain, or subjects, if you prefer. But even the MPs aren't wild about it. You know, and that is going to be a problem for Starmer, especially since they want to come back for another bite of the welfare bill, and the MPs are going to be feeling rebellious about that. If they're also rebelling on this, completely legitimately, by the way, because it wasn't in the manifesto and it wasn't part of the offer, I think they're going to face problems in Parliament. But what do you think about the country?
Well, I think that, you know, in terms of the public, I think there was some shaky polling suggesting the public just about supported it. But two things have happened, one of which is Starmer's announced it, and there's been a snap poll out showing that public have now turned against it as a result of that, which suggests that he has sort of got the reverse minus touch to an extent. The second thing is that the people who are against it are really against it. So it's sort of a maybe sort of slight majority, but sort of wafer-thin support versus a very vocal minority. I think it's 1.5 million people have signed a petition now in about 24 hours or so. You've got Nigel Farage, Kevin Bain not out there leading a charge against it. It's going to be a potential radicalising issue. Now, I think some of the discussion around it is very different to how ID cards were 20 years ago. There are less than sort of way of hacking risks, but there are still some considerable concerns. And given how little faith there is in the state right now, and that was something someone talked about in his speech today, it seems unlikely that this is going to be the measure that sort of changes all of that and encourages people to start believing in Keir Starmer again.
You see, this is going to really date me, but I remember when David Davis and Shami Chakrabarti united to plot against this, like years ago.
2006, was it?
It could be as much as 19 years ago, yeah. But it's not about index of the sheer breadth of the spectrum that really feels strongly about this, you know, from a kind of libertarian right point of view and from a really hardcore anti-authoritarian
He's saying
left.
it's about illegal migration. Yeah. And actually, I mean, that's not necessarily...
Well, I mean, countries like Germany, for instance, have ID cards, and that hasn't stopped them having a lot of illegal migration.
You know, we'll see how that develops. Obviously controversial already, even though he just announced it today. If we go to the Daily Telegraph, very interesting headline there. King key to Trump U-turn in Ukraine. And we did see that amazing U-turn from Donald Trump about like territory in Ukraine, that it could get it all back. And apparently it was all due to the king.
Well, the king kind of did flatter him, certainly. And you could tell that from this speech he gave at Windsor. He really laboured over what a unique honour it was to be invited twice. Some people would say that wasn't classy, to go on about how greatly you've been honoured. But Donald Trump is not a person who really, you know, puts that front and centre. The problem with poring over his mood and what influences his mood and how his mood is that the guy is labile. It doesn't actually... It's not over till it's over with this man.
James?
Yeah, I think totally. I mean, this is the thing, is that Donald Trump changes like the weather. So I think it may well be the case that it played a role in it and played to Trump's ego. And, of course, these comments are not from the British, not just from the British end, but also Zelensky's chief of staff saying it on the record. The key thing is whether that's actually going to stay, because you know, Trump is also quite susceptible to Russian flattery, it seems, as well, by some of the comments and stances.
As they say, the last person who speaks to him, you know, kind of...
Yeah, like a chair.
I'm so sorry, Zoe. We're going to have to go on to the next story. Another royal story, very different tone. The Daily Mirror, though, it's on quite a few front pages. This Prince William, the headline in the Mirror, the hardest year I've ever had. And Zoe, I'll start with you. 2024, and of course, cancer, both his father and his wife.
I mean, it's one of the many tragedies of this family is that it's not kind of hold the front page stuff, that it's a really hard year when you have so much illness in the family and so much kind of sotto voce scandal with your estranged brother. But the very fact that they so rarely say anything that feels kind of from the heart means that this has made 3 front pages.
Yeah, Express, Mirror and Star. James?
It's very different from, say, for instance, a few generations ago when it would be sort of never complain, never explain. They are talking about it human-sized. I think that's perhaps a realisation that the future of the monarchy depends on basically the public's support and like of William and Kate. And so hence why they're talking about them as personalities rather than just the institution of the firm.
Yeah, and of course, so many people are touched by cancer in one way or another
Absolutely.
that it's bound to resonate. Zoe, James, thanks so much. I'll see you again on the 11 o'clock coming up next on Sky News at 11. UN delegates storm out of the hall as Israel's Prime Minister starts to speak at the General Assembly.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.